Welcome back to another ranking. Today we're going to be focusing on the different enemy factions in readyornot, and we're going to be limiting this to the 9 factions that are considered to be the main enemy factions. And like the previous installment in this little mini-series that I'm going to be doing with ranking and whatnot, it's going to be loosely based on a few criteria. In this case, it's going to be the aesthetics, the atmosphere, and the lore of each of the factions. And in terms of atmosphere, I'm mainly focusing on the faction itself and not necessarily the maps the missions take place on. Also, the reason I kind of sound different and you're not seeing me in the corner like last time is I'm currently recording this in my dorm room with a broken ankle on an HP laptop, and I've got none of my normal equipment. But yeah, with that all out of the way, let's get started. I'm going to butcher this horribly, but our first faction is going to be the Los Locos del Pacificos. I did not take Spanish in high school, so apologize if I butchered that. But basically, this is the faction that you see. So they're behind the operation in Twisted Nerve with the drug lab, and they're also kind of involved a little bit with the very first mission, Thank You Come Again. And basically, they're not quite the Mexican cartel, but they work with the Mexican cartel, and their main maps that they're the main enemy in is going to be Rust Belt, Greased Palms, Ends of the Earth, Narcos, and Hunger Strike. So they're in the base game and they're in the couple of the DLCs. So basically, aesthetically, I mean, they're not the coolest, I have to say, compared to some other, as we get on in this list, they don't have as much aesthetically pleasing outfits, I guess, as the other ones. You know, they're gang members, they don't wear cool stuff, they're usually unarmored, and I know obviously this is subjective, so if you disagree, let me know in the comments down below. But aesthetically, not that cool. Atmosphere wise, if you watched the previous video, you know I'm partial to Twisted Nerve, but that's the map itself. Disregarding that, you know, aesthetically they're not, like I said, not the coolest. Atmosphere wise, they don't really, to me at least, scare me. You know what I mean? Like, they're not an enemy that I'm afraid to go up against. You know, they're not trained. They're not necessarily, like, they're not saying some spooky stuff to get you uneasy. And lore-wise, I mean, they're connected. They're kind of a jack of all trades. Like, they're connected through multiple storylines, including the drug trafficking, human trafficking, and also the weapons trafficking. So they're, like in Rust Belt, you have the human trafficking from the south of the border, bringing people into the United States. In Greased Palms, Ends of the Earth, you know, that's the firearm trafficking, where they're manufacturing it in Ends of the Earth and distributing it in Greased Palms. And with Narcos, they're the main group that you're going against because they've captured that one undercover agent. And similarly to Twisted Nerve, similar with the drug trade in Hunger Strike. So the lore is not that deep. There's not too many twists. They're involved. They have their fingers in a lot of things. And overall, kind of like Thank You Come Again, we're going to start off with dropping them in the bottom tier, just because compared to the rest of them on this list, they, to me at least, seem like they not necessarily, they don't have the least amount of work put into them, but they're not the most, compared to the other ones, they just don't come close. And up next, that's going to lead us to the Left Behind. So the Left Behind are the group that I did a video on previously, a little bit of their lore, more in depth, but they're the group of former veterans who have basically become disgruntled with the government because they serve their country, they come back, and they're not getting the support they need, whether that's financially, medically, whatever. They made sacrifices for their country, they come back, and they're not being treated with basically the human decency that they deserve. And Governor Whitfield, who's running to become a senator, is planning to support a bill that's going to cut the funding to the VA. So the Left Behind obviously are disgruntled by this because they already don't have the support that they need. And this bill is going to further withdraw that support from them and make things worse. So these disgruntled veterans get together and they create this domestic terrorist group called the Left Behind. And they use the Ides of March, that mission where you go in. It's one of the first ones, I think, that has traps in it. and you take them out, you find the weapons and everything else, and if you pay attention, you know that they were there to assassinate Governor Whitfield at one of his speeches. So they are unsuccessful in doing so. D Platoon goes in and they apprehend them. And from there, you get Sins of the Father, which is where his family is taken to a hotel and under guard, of the Secret Service. And unbeknownst to them, some of the members of the Secret Service team are actually plants from the Left Behind. And as a result, they take the family hostage and they film that video and everything like that. So that's kind of a brief introduction to the lore. It's a sympathetic cause. I mean, obviously, compared to the previous one we've got here, the Left Behind are more idealistic than they are just motivated by financial gain. So, lore-wise, it's a bit deeper. It's almost, like I said, it's almost you're sympathetic towards them because they have their reasons, whether their actions might not be the right ones depending on how you look at it, but they have their reasons, and it's not purely for financial gain. Aesthetically, you can see, like I said, these are veterans, so you can see some of them have prosthetic limbs and things like that. And as far as I'm concerned, maybe with the Black Sentinels down the line, maybe you'd see something similar because they're also veterans. But I haven't seen anybody else really have that degree of, you take a second and you look back and it really makes you think, who are you fighting? And because they're veterans, they're also highly trained and well armed, and they have body armor and everything else like that. Not necessarily that veterans would have body armor, but the training they have, they are a formidable enemy to go against. And so if you go in unprepared, it's extremely difficult, especially with the traps and having to go slow. And the one guy that's got the machine gun, they're not somebody to take lightly. And atmosphere-wise, the things that they say to you, like you'll hear them throughout the missions talk about how they served, how they're not getting the support they need, and it kind of clues you into that this is a group of people that need help, and unfortunately they're not receiving the help they need, so they take matters into their own hands and they try to assassinate somebody. So in essence, that's the Left Behind, and I'm a huge fan of this faction. I'm a little bit partial to them, I won't lie. So we just really flew up there. But anyway, so like I said, on a laptop. But I'm putting them in S just because the rest of these factions, none of them really make you feel sympathetic towards them. Like some of them you might, absolutely despise because of what they do. Some of them are cool. Some of them are not so cool. But these guys, to me, are the ones that really, truly almost make you understand why they're doing what they're doing. And you can be sympathetic towards them a little bit. But because they don't necessarily target civilians in the Left Behind. Sorry, not in the Left Behind. The Left Behind don't target civilians in Ides of March directly. But in Sins of the Father, they do end up killing a couple civilians. So, unfortunate. But with that, moving on, we're going to the Bolton Security. So these are the guys that are in the Spider and Valley of the Dolls. They're different than the Security and Mindjot, but I want to make that distinction because the three maps there are kind of woven together. And that's the... How do I say this without being demonetized? That's the kind of predatory faction, if you will. So Bolton Security is on the Spider and Valley of the Dolls. So they're the security team that's basically guarding that talent agency and the birthday party for those two missions. And they are aware of what is going on. You kind of have to be blind working in that scenario to see it. So they're not innocent. They're not just like, oh, they're like, what's it, Allied Security or Allied Universal, I forget what it's called. But that big security company that, contracts armed guards out and stuff like that, they're not like that. They are aware of what's going on. And in that sense, they're not innocent. They're not giving up when D Platoon and SWAT and the LSPD shows up. They're fighting back at you. Aesthetically wise, I mean, especially the map, the spider. I think Valley of the Dolls does it too once you get to the basement, but the spider specifically is just like a grimy, dirty map, and I'm not trying to I'm not bringing in the map itself here, but the feeling that map gives is the feeling I get when I see like the Bolton security guards, because they're dirty, like it's gross, like trying to protect something like that. And it's similar to that cartel group, is it's for financial gain, and it's disgusting. So, but you know what, I will say, like, just because I don't like what they're doing doesn't mean that they're going to be ranked lower. I mean, they do a good job of making you feel that, and like, you got to respect that, because just in the ways that these guys, the Left Behind, make you feel sympathy, these guys, Bolton Security, make you basically just despise them, and they do a good job in doing that. So it's definitely not going to go against them. Atmosphere-wise, similar to what I said earlier, it's like dirty, because especially going in with the hindsight when you're replaying these maps of knowing what's going on behind the scenes and seeing this stuff, you know that it's just gross and they make you feel disgusting. So really, I mean, they do a good job. I don't think they're as powerful as a faction as the Left Behind in the sense of the feelings they invoke, but they definitely make you feel gross, and they do a good job with that. So like, I'm between high B and low A. Maybe I'll move it later. I hope I don't, but I'm going to put it at low A. So, moving on, up next we have the Hand. So this is the terrorist group from the Hand. Jeez. This is the terrorist group from Neon Tomb and Relapse. So Neon Tomb is the one they go in, you know, it's an active shooting scenario in the nightclub. And unfortunately, like I said, I'm not bringing the missions themselves, the maps of the missions themselves, into the ranking, or at least I'm trying not to. But the aesthetics and atmosphere of that map is haunting. Like, you're going through, and once you've taken out a couple of them and the gunshots calm down and there's not as many left and you're still looking, you can hear the phones ring of the victims, which is, like, according to like the real first responders and everything, that's what you hear when you have a mass casualty incident like that, and it's haunting, really. I'm gonna try not to include that in the actual ranking here, but they do a good job of, similar to Bolton Security, just making you feel like horrible and in a way hate the faction for what they do. But going through those missions, and Relapse as well, like, they plant bombs in the hospital, you know, like, they are not necessarily, I'm going to say, financially motivated like this cartel group down here, but more motivated in maybe the traditional sense somebody thinks of when they think of terrorists, because they're going through a sort of, maybe political is not the right word, but I'm going to go with political gains is what they're seeking, right? They're trying to spread a message and make it very clear that they're here to cause harm. And you know, they do a good job in doing that, obviously, with the number of casualties in Neon Tomb and the damage done in Relapse of the bombs being planted. They're actually, I think they're based from Yemen. So currently, I actually am not too up to date on it, but Yemen was at least kind of fractured with kind of a civil war going on between two different groups. So if that's still the case at the time of this recording, I don't know, I'm a little out of touch with global politics, but depending on what side they're coming from, if I remember correctly, so a little history thing, the CIA, or the Ready or Not's equivalent, USIA, is very much involved in funding certain organizations, and lore-wise, it appears that, and it's unconfirmed, but formerly they would work for the USIA. And this is basically all the information I'm giving here is from my own gameplay and from the Ready or Not wiki, so if you have any questions or think anything I said is incorrect, please refer to the wiki. Comment down below if anything I say isn't correct, but this is going off of the wiki as it stands on April 9th, 2026. So, like the Taliban, for instance, in our world, similar kind of story to that. So the USIA, if you don't know, not one of the factions we're ranking now because technically they are like a friendly faction, but different groups within this, with different factions, the mini factions like the cultists in not Valley of the Dolls, but I can't remember the name of it. Carriers of the Vine. Those cultists, like, they have a former USIA member who's leading them. Or when you do a lethal obsession and you're up in the woods, that's a former USIA analyst there. So, or operative, whatever you want to call them. So the USIA has their fingers kind of woven into a lot of these groups, like the Mariposa Lily organization, Black Sentinels a little bit, so all that. But in general, this is kind of lore-wise your run-of-the-mill terrorist organization, and it's haunting, but I don't think they kill a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but they don't give me that kind of gross feeling as much as Bolton Security does. And then like aesthetically, they kind of have that. They do a good job in Relapse where like some of them will dress up as the doctors and it can be hard to tell, but they're not. I guess when I say aesthetics, I'm going off of how cool they look, which is maybe it's a little immature, but they don't look that cool. So I'm gonna drop them in B, and that's where they're gonna stay. So next up is the Human Traffickers, which is also called the Spider faction, not to be confused with the map the Spider and that storyline within Ready or Not. So this is the picture they have for them is what you see in the hide and seek map at the port. So that's not to be confused. Like I said, it's not to be confused with the map the Spider. So these are the people that appear in the Buy Cheap Buy Twice and hide and seek. So Buy Cheap Buy Twice is the car dealership, and they do the humans, the weapons, and the drug trafficking. And when you're doing the map hide and seek, when you go through, you'll see that one container with the car, you'll see the one with the weapons, you'll see the one with the drugs, and then you'll see the one with the container full of women. So these human traffickers have a lot of connections. And they use the spider reference here because they are commonly seen. The spider symbol is commonly seen throughout the map. And when you get to the end of the map, should have given you guys a spoiler warning, but you kind of come across this auction scene. And this auction scene essentially is you have these women that they're trafficking, and you have these masked buyers that are trying to purchase all these women. So lore-wise, these are similar to Bolton Security, except these are the people that are doing it. They're not just guarding it. They're actively participating in this trafficking and the horrible atrocities that they're committing. They are really bad. So essentially, and in addition to the trafficking of everything I mentioned, they also do auto trafficking, which goes through. That's like why you see the one container with a car, but it's really not that important because it's a car. It's not drugs, weapons, or people. But yes, the spider is their main symbol, and your symbols are powerful. So like aesthetically wise, they do a good job of doing basically having that clear message that like this is a organized crime, or like this is organized crime. They are a crime organization, and they, like Bolton Security, are committing crimes, like with the cartel, drugs, weapons. Their human trafficking is a little bit all human trafficking is wrong, don't get me wrong, but their human trafficking is to bring people from like Mexico, for instance, into the United States. And those people get taken advantage of financially and maybe other ways too. This human trafficking is for the purpose of like human slaves and things like that. So much worse than that. They're both bad, but these guys are on a completely different level compared to them. So because of that, combining the feelings they give with Bolton Security, and they're also connected to the Russian mob too, which is why you see like at the port those people that are like, you hear like that Eastern Europe accent. So they have a lot of connections, and I don't want to dive too deep into the connections because this video would be like 2 hours long for only 9 things. But essentially, they have all these different legs or fingers for this spider. Think of them as like their connections. They are woven like a web into the criminal networks across the world. And they have their fingers in a lot of things, like the cars, the drugs, the people, the weapons. So being so connected and being so large and only being on like two prominent missions, I would not be surprised if we see this faction again in the future, just because of how deep the connections go and how unresolved it feels at the end of the mission when you see that auction and then people start to realize the police are there and then they all get off and you don't see them anymore. Obviously, if this is internationally, because it is a port, it's an international port, these women could be getting trafficked all across the world. Obviously, LSPD wouldn't be working on something in like outside of the US or even out of their jurisdiction of the city, but essentially I would not be surprised if they came up again. And aesthetically wise, like I said, they, like Bolton Security, make you feel gross, even more so. And so because of that, I'm gonna put them high A. I don't think it's that sympathetic feeling that you get towards the Left Behind that makes them surpass all the others in this case so far, because it's easy to make you hate a bad guy for doing bad things, right? Like, they're obviously committing atrocities, but for instance, the Left Behind commits atrocities, right? There's no, especially in Sins of the Father, where they're killing civilians, but it is much more difficult for a faction that is committing those atrocities to make you feel sympathetic for them than it is for that faction to make you hate their guts. So that's why they do a great job of making you hate them, but they don't have any of that sympathy that the Left Behind has. So that's why they're going to be in A and not S. So moving forward, up next we have the United Planet Front. And so this is another domestic terrorist group. I'm not going to say they're as sympathetic as the Left Behind, purely from a personal standpoint. Like, I like the environment, right? I think we should protect the environment, but I don't think trying to assassinate a person who's lobbying. So let me start over. So the United Planet Front is from the Dark Waters DLC, and they're on the mission Lawmaker and Leviathan. So Lawmaker is the one with the big house. Actually, sorry, I apologize. Lawmaker is the Home Invasion DLC. Leviathan is the Dark Waters DLC. So basically, in Lawmaker, that main guy is a huge lobbyist for the oil industry, and they want a new oil pipeline. And the Left Behind uses that hurricane that blew through in the Home Invasion DLC as a distraction to go in and try and take them out. So their motives and possible connections to the USIA as well, but are essentially, they're their green energy kind of, we don't want oil, we want the environment to be protected, which, it's true, the environment should be protected, but they go above and beyond like, I feel like, the environment is one of those political issues that, maybe you don't need to go and do stuff like that, but, not to get too political personally, but essentially their motives think environment, think green, that kind of thing. So in Leviathan at the oil rig, they go on and assassinate an oil rig worker and take over their oil rig, and they use the attempted assassination of another politician as a distraction to draw police away from this oil rig situation so that they can successfully take it over. And in doing so, their goal is basically like, stop this oil, stop this, focus on green energy, that kind of stuff. So the reason I started out with all this lore kind of stuff here is I'm trying to compare basically the Left Behind, the Spider, and the United Planet Front, because they have somewhat of a sympathetic cause, but not in the way that the Left Behind has. It's almost, I'm not going to say it's like a copy, because it's two completely different things, but they do have this sympathetic cause with them. It's just not as sympathetic as the Left Behind. And then with the Spider, obviously it's easy to hate a faction like that. and not understand why they're doing this besides, purely financial gain or power or whatever. But with the United Planet Front, like I said, there is that little bit of sympathy. So basically, and aesthetically wise, it's similar to the cartel group down here. I keep calling them the cartel because I don't want to try and butcher their name again. I don't think they're aesthetically that cool, outfit wise, but with that out of the way and atmosphere wise, cool missions in themselves. Not to include the map, but they are cool missions. And essentially, I don't think they fall strong enough in the sympathy to be compared to the Left Behind in that sense completely. And they have a good cause in the sense that, like, it's interesting. Not that their cause is good, but overall, I don't think they meet the level of disdain as the spider or human traffickers do. But they also don't garnish. I think it's garner. I don't even know. English is my first language and I can barely speak it, but essentially, they don't generate, is what I'm going to use, as much hatred as the spider does, and they don't get enough sympathy. So I'm either high C or low B. I'm going to put them in C, just because, like, they don't invoke as many strong feelings, as either of these two factions do. And then aesthetically and atmosphere wise, they're not scary to fight against. They're not very well trained at all, and they're not anything special aesthetically. Okay, up next we have and I apologize again in advance, Los Navigantes del Chaos, which is the Navigators of Chaos? Yeah, so the Navigators of Chaos is what I'm going to call them because I cannot speak Spanish for the life of me. They appear in the very last mission of the Dark Waters DLC, which is the 3-letter triad, and they also appear in the first mission of the Boiling Point DLC, which is the no good deed when you're on the pier. So they're from South America. The wiki calls them like South American and agitators, but basically they're sort of like mercenaries in a way, and they're basically being used by a couple of the other groups. Specifically, I believe it's the Mariposa Lily organization that is kind of pulling the strings a little bit. But 3-letter triad, if you don't really pay attention to it, seems like a really weird mission because you're going in and you're fighting these guys, but then you're also fighting the Black Sentinels, who we'll get to in a little bit, and there's a clear difference in skill level between them, and also how they look, and the weapons they use, and everything like that. But aesthetically wise, these guys do a really good job of looking cool. And like I said, it's immature, but they do look cool. Especially a lot cooler than these guys, because they're not like the run-of-the-mill, like, cartel kind of look. They're wearing police uniforms. They're wearing, like, I think this is a kind of like masks, stuff like that. Not like a mask like this, but cool masks. And, you take a second when you're playing, especially No Good Deed, and they're dressed up in police uniforms, and you're like, wait a minute, what? And then they start shooting at you, and you're like, okay. So, aesthetically wise, they're really cool. And they aren't insanely difficult to play against, but they're definitely harder than the cartel from before, and I would be willing to say they're as difficult as probably the Hand. And lore-wise, there's not too much available on the wiki, but as I was saying, they're kind of like a tool being used by these other groups. And because of that, like, aesthetically, I'm going to put them in, but mostly from aesthetics and the atmosphere, I'm going to put them up in B. Lore-wise, there's not too much available at the moment. I would love to look into it more, but from my current knowledge and the wiki, there's not too much to work on. So they're going to be stuck in B. And that's going to bring us next to the Black Sentinels, which is the group that appears in 3-letter triad, All Gods Burn, and A New America. So that's the Dark Waters DLC and the new Boiling Point DLC. So these guys, similar to the Left Behind, are made up of veterans, ex-special forces, basically very highly trained individuals. And rather than the Left Behind, where they have a political motive, theirs is more financial. They are mercenaries for hire, and they're being hired by the Mariposa Lily organization, who we'll get to next. But essentially, they are being used to incite chaos, similar to this Navigators of Chaos. There you go. And they're used in three-letter triad, No Good Deed, and A New America, like I said. So I'm mostly going to focus on No Good Deed and A New America in this one. Especially in New America, going against these guys is insane. Like, you have to be on your toes at all times, especially if you're playing on hard difficulty. They are incredibly hard to engage. They're well armed, well trained, well equipped, and they look like really good. They look really cool. So, like, I'm just gonna put that out there. They look really cool. They're dressed like they got this all black kit. They're kitted out. They got cool weapons. They move very well. And like, you can be engaging one, they'll put a couple rounds at you, and then they'll actually not even, I don't want to use the word flee, but like tactically retreat, even to other rooms, set up, wait for you to come in, or get other people to go over and attack you. So like in A New America specifically, like they can see you on the cameras. That's why you might want to turn the power off so the cameras go off. But they can use that to locate you as you can use it to locate them. So it's kind of like a game of cat and mouse in two directions. So it's really cool. Mission aside though, lore-wise, so like I was saying, mercenaries, veterans, highly trained, really cool. And they're basically being used as a tool to incite chaos, like I said. So they're behind the riots in the Boiling Point DLC. They're the ones with the explosives. They're the ones basically that you are majorly fighting during the mission. So like in A New America, you have like the rioters and stuff like that, but then you also have, as you get further in, these people. Now, Black Sentinel, specifically in All Gods Burn, is you're in the bank, you're going through, and you kind of get through the rioters in the first section, and then as you progress, you start to notice, similar to three-letter triad, that like something else is going on here. They got more people, different groups here, and they also have USI agents with them, like former ones, so they're highly trained, well experienced people. And so in All Gods Burn, when you go in and you see the rioters, you get through them, and the further you go in, you start to realize, hey, there's bombs all over the place, and there's these guys that are kitted out, and they're a lot stronger than these other enemies that we're facing, these rioters. So basically, they're sent in there by the MLO, which is the Mariposa Lily organization, to basically incite this chaos by blowing up the building. And they're stopped by D Platoon. And then similar story in A New America, where they're causing chaos, and if you don't do it right, which I'm pretty sure, unless you've seen something the first time everybody plays that mission, if you're able to get up there, we're all grabbing that detonator and we're blowing up the building next door, and the past 20 minutes is out the window. But yeah, they're really cool, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw them top A. Even no, they're gonna go in S. They're cool. They're like the bottom of the S though. Like, as cool as they are, like I said, it's more you're interested in their motives and everything else like that. But their motives do boil down to financial reasons, which isn't as strong as like the Left Behind's political gain and sympathetic goals. But they are really cool, scary to fight against, and awesome overall. So moving on, we're going to be going over the last, which is the MLO, or the Mariposa Lily Foundation organization. Not MLF. MLO. Mariposa Lily Organization. So essentially, these are, think your shadow government, shadow people, and they technically appear a little bit. There's an achievement you can get in three-letter triad, where you blow open that one wall with a C2 charge, you can put your mirror gun in and see them. A little organization of them, essentially. So they technically appear in three-letter triad, No Good Deed, All Gods Burn, A New America, and they were like a scrapped faction, so originally they were in Carriers of the Vine during the early access portion of that mission and in the cut PvP mode. But in Three Letters Triad and No Good Deed, they're never seen, but they're behind the groups that are there. So the Navigators of Chaos are being used by the MLO, and Black Sentinel is being used by the MLO. So that's why they're involved in those two maps, but they're not necessarily seen there. And then in All Gods Burn, in the vault, you hear the voice of them on the body that you discover once you get the vault open. So once again, they're not technically seen, but they are heard. And then in A New America, that final enemy who does have the vest on him and the explosives and everything else like that, he is the MLO agent that you're going to interact with. So lore-wise, they have a lot of ties in with all the USIA and everything else like that. So they kind of float throughout as the shadowy puppet, puppet master is the word I'm looking for. So they're this shadow puppet master organization that's behind a lot of the stuff, especially in the DLC, but throughout the game as you go, there kind of are whispers of them, especially from the Lethal Obsession mission, and anytime you really interact with the USIA, like in Carriers of the Vine and a Lethal Obsession, anything really with the USIA, they seem to be, they are like a project or brainchild of the USIA, and anything that really has to do with the USIA, they are a part of. And aesthetically, I mean, the guy's wearing a flower on his face and manages to look cool as hell. So, yeah, they're cool. And similar to Black Sentinel, like, they are... You don't get to fight against them as much as a group as you're fighting them logically and in the shadows, in a sense. Not in a combat scenario, except for in A New America. But overall, they are incredibly talented, and they have the resources to employ these groups. And as a result, they make a formidable force to fight, even if you're not fighting them directly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go put them at the top of the S. They beat out everybody else just from an aesthetics and atmosphere, and lore-wise, they probably have the deepest lore of all, and I would not be surprised to see them pop up in another couple DLCs or other missions as time progresses. But that's the list, so let me know what you think in the comments below. If you liked it, leave a like. Let me know what you think. I'm open to hear it. And if you have any other lore you want to hear about specifically, let me know that too, because I'd be happy to make a video on it. Thank you for watching.